Hi there, this is Elise Benin, your marketing mentor. And this is the podcast for you if and only if you are ready to leave the feast or famine syndrome behind, and I mean for good. Linda Secondari is on a mission to rid the world of unnecessary meetings. That's why when she heard my last podcast episode, number 503, on what to do if you have too many meetings, Linda, who is the founder of Studiolo Secondari, reached out and offered to share her approach to fewer meetings and better results. She also shares the 3 types of meetings and a few alternatives to meetings that save time, which I'm sure you know is your most precious resource. So listen and learn. All right, Linda, welcome to the podcast, the video version.
Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, Elise.
Yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself.
So I am Linda Secondari, and I am the principal of Studiolo Secondari, and we are a design strategy firm located in New York City. We work mainly with authors and publishers to develop books and take them to market, but we also work with authors and publishers on their digital communications, so social media and newsletters and websites to ensure that their message is getting out there.
And we're talking today because I put out a podcast recently about too many meetings, and you responded to me immediately. So tell me why. What did you respond to, and what got you so excited?
Well, it may seem very kind of remotely adjacent, but I am absolutely evangelical about meetings. And it is my mission to sort of rid the world of unnecessary meetings and to ensure that the meetings we have are done the best way possible, that they're the best meeting ever. And to that end, I put together a workshop initially during the pandemic, because meetings just kind of skyrocketed by like 20 or 30%. People were just meeting more often. And there was a flurry of reports about this. And I had actually, in a previous life, when I worked in-house at Oxford University Press, I had been part of a task force to assess how many meetings everyone had and how to improve our meeting success rates. And so during the pandemic, I thought, oh, well, why don't I kind of repurpose that content and do some workshops? And I did. That was successful, and that was great. And then when I heard your podcast, I thought, oh my God, I have to talk to Elise, because the content is, absolutely evergreen. And I thought that you have such a huge audience. I would love to be able to speak to them about my ideas about meetings.
And just in terms of time frame and evergreenness, do you think that here we are recording July 2024, so more than 4 years after the pandemic started, do you find that people are still having lots of meetings, or has it gone back to the way it was? What's your take on that at the moment?
Well, I still see, the occasional New York Times or Harvard Business Review article about meetings. So I think meetings continue to be a problem. It is such a knee-jerk kind of thing to do, like, oh, well, let's just meet about this issue and it'll get solved in a meeting. So it is, I think, a very human, understandably human, but kind of lazy way to try to come to a consensus. And then more than ever, though, I think that people have lost the thread on how to run a meeting. I just don't think you can have a meeting without an agenda. Someone has to be thinking about how the meeting is going to play out and what the objectives of the meeting are. Anytime you have a meeting, you've got a lot of paychecks sitting around the table. You're spending a lot of money, but you're also spending a lot of time, and time is our absolutely most precious commodity. We have limited amounts of time, unfortunately, and they're limited in ways that almost no other commodity are limited. And I think we need to respect our time, and we need to respect the time of everyone who's in these meetings with us. And it's not that you shouldn't have a meeting. There are some kinds of meetings that definitely should be done synchronously, where everyone's in the meeting at the same time. But I've identified three kinds of meetings, and those are decision making meetings, informational meetings, and collaborative meetings. And so I have like a decision tree that helps you understand what kind of a meeting it is that you are actually thinking about scheduling. And it's a cute little sort of memory device. I can actually, since we're doing this on video, I can share with
Do
our
that.
home
And
audience.
actually, as we're talking, also, I'm curious what your take is on how to integrate AI into this meeting process. So speak to that as we go, or I'll ask it as a separate question.
I think that's a cool component. I can, just off the top of my head, the way I have integrated AI is I have a Fathom note taker that attends all of my virtual meetings. Zoom has its own note taker. There's Otter, there's a lot. I think they're all basically the same. The reason I use the Fathom note taker is, number one, it captures the video and the audio of every meeting, and like everybody, I have a lot of meetings, and especially as a small business owner, I have a lot of sort of discovery meetings with potential new clients. And it's easy for me to 3 weeks out forget what that conversation was about. And I can go through the Fathom note taker and I can look at that video. And the note taker gives me a highlight transcript with minute signatures, so I can see where a piece of the conversation happened that I'm interested in. I can just jump to that part of the video. So that right there is AI in all of its glory. And I think that those tools are only going to get more and more sophisticated. And they are definitely going to address one of the challenges that I've kind of alluded to. And that is having an agenda at the beginning of the meeting, taking notes during the meeting, and having minutes at the end of the meeting. They don't have to be, long, elaborate, but a bulleted list of what was decided and who's responsible for what and when. And then at the next meeting, that's the first thing you go over is, look, we met 2 weeks ago and we decided we were going to do this. So and so, did you get that done? If so, great. If not, why? And how can we get that done in a week? And, just go through that. And what that does, is obviously it's good project management. It keeps the project moving forward, but it also creates a sense of accountability. It reinforces for everyone that, we're doing something with our time. And when you can see that people have done their action points, then you feel like you're actually getting somewhere. All of that is really important and useful. And I think AI is more and more going to help us with that scaffolding that we need to support a really good meeting.
And just one more question about AI before you walk us through this decision map. Do you ever send the Fathom note taker to a meeting and you don't attend? You send it in your place?
I haven't personally done that, but I do in my role as publisher for the Graphic Artists Guild. I have a monthly handbook committee meeting, and I have several people who can't attend that meeting because of the timing, and they send their note takers And they do seem to be following along, because then in the Slack channel, I'll see that they've responded to maybe a question that I posed, or if I ask if someone's willing to volunteer to do something, I'll see that they are engaging with those requests. So I do think that that is an option, obviously, and it depends on the kind of meeting it is and your role in that meeting. But absolutely, I think that that's a way to address scheduling challenges. Of course, you have to then have the wherewithal to like actually either look at the summary or sit through it. You can listen to it at double speed. You don't have to sit through an hour-long meeting, but you have to do that. Like, just sending your Fathom note taker isn't going to solve all your problems. Back to my three different kinds of meetings, there's decision making, informational, and collaborative. All of these can be augmented by kind of asynchronous tools. Like, simple asynchronous tool would be something like Slack or a chat platform, or even exchanging emails or sharing a document. A lot of prepping for meetings can be done asynchronously. So if you think about a collaborative meeting, and collaborative meetings are definitely a meeting that benefits from real-time engagement of the collaborators. But typically there's a lot of catching up and maybe homework that can be done asynchronously. So maybe if you thought you needed to have a kind of 90-minute workshop meeting with your brain trust to solve some problems, maybe actually you only need a 45-minute meeting if everyone uses 45 minutes to asynchronously kind of get up to speed with what they need to be up to speed on, so that when you start the meeting, you can just dive into the collaboration part and get that done expeditiously. Information meetings are, your like weekly catch ups and your status report meetings. And those are meetings that really, other than occasionally for kind of just engagement to keep the relationship going, in terms of the actual substance of that meeting, they don't need to be a synchronous meeting. There's a lot of different reporting platforms where people can give you updates, and you can see whether or not they've done what they're supposed to do, or how busy they are, or when they're going on vacation. That doesn't really need to be a meeting where you are spending a half an hour with all of your direct reports. So again, coming to my own personal story, I managed a team of 40 designers and art directors when I was at Oxford University Press. And we were all over the world. We were in New York, we were in Oxford, in Delhi, and in Toronto. So we had three significantly different time zones, and there really was absolutely no daylight over all of us, meaning it was virtually impossible for the US and India to be meeting with England. It just never happened, because someone would be asleep. But I had these catch ups with my team and my direct reports, and I had 10 direct reports, and a half an hour, that's 5 hours a week if I was meeting with them weekly. And one of the reasons why I'm like so evangelistic about this meeting content is because I think I made all the mistakes. I am absolutely speaking from a very humble place. I have made all of these mistakes, and I absolutely was meeting with all of my direct reports for a half an hour every week for a few years, until I realized that we weren't getting anywhere. We had also kind of our relationships had gotten to the point where I didn't need to be speaking to them every week. I was a remote manager, so I did want them to have FaceTime with me if they didn't see me all the time. But I started doing, every other week. I think at the end we were meeting once a month, and then weekly I was just getting a written report from everyone. And I would alternate what weeks I was meeting with whomever, so that I had, maybe 2 hours of meetings every week related to direct reports spread over a month. So an assessment is one of the things that I think people should do, which is, looking at your calendar and seeing how much time you are spending in meetings. Often that's a really mind blowing thing to do. And then determining what kind of meetings you're having, if they're decision making, informational, or collaborative. And if they are informational, understanding, maybe you can eliminate them or at least reduce their frequency or make them shorter. And then with the decision making meetings and the collaborative meetings, is there a way to have an asynchronous aspect to that meeting so that when people are actually meeting, it's for less time and it's more effective? So that's basically what the decision tree is supposed to help you figure out in sort of a fun way, and it's a cute little poster.
So just walk us through it, and kind of with small business owners and creatives like you in mind, and clients asking for meetings when maybe some may not necessarily be needed.
I think, you can, you start here. Does this meeting have goals and an agenda? And if it says no, then you want to start over. You want to get a meeting with your goals and agenda, and then you start over. So if it's a yes, then is it a recurring meeting? Is it a status update meeting? If it is, it sounds more like an email. And I use email as a sort of blanket term to cover any kind of asynchronous communication where you can be updating people. If it's a decision-making meeting, is the topic, complex with lots of moving parts? And if that's yes, then, are the deciders prepped? So this is where the asynchronous aspects can come in. If the deciders aren't prepped, then put the info into some sort of a shared document and start all over. So again, these purple squares are sort of like your pauses, like let's reconsider this assumption. If the deciders are prepped, then you can have a great meeting. If it's an informational meeting, it might be an email, or you might have a topic with lots of moving parts and you have to prep everyone and share that and then have a great meeting. The collaborative meetings, you want to make sure that it's worth spending all the time and money to get everyone together. And if you're not sure, then you want to, again, think about some asynchronous prepping. And if it is worth that, then, have a great meeting. The alternatives to having meetings, video is a great way to communicate ideas. And people often will have a meeting because they just think it's easier. It's easier to just explain it rather than have to, write maybe an elaborate email. And, there's tone of voice and stuff, things that get lost in written communication. So there's no reason why you can't just make a recording through, Loom or Zoom. You can record yourself and then just send that as an explanation instead of actually having a meeting. And then it's up to the person who receives that communication. If they think, oh, this explained it all, great, let's just move forward. Or if not, let's have a meeting. And this is something that I think works really well with clients to make them, it's a little more high touch than sending a long email with a lot of requests, especially if you're asking. For instance, I recently had a client who had to give me agency access to their MailChimp so that we could do their newsletter, develop their newsletter template. And they were just having, some trouble with that. So we created a video showing the different, buttons that had to be pushed on MailChimp and the different tabs that needed to be looked at, and sent that to them. And they were able to get that done really quickly. I think if I had sent them just a link to the MailChimp page that has the itemized instructions, that would have been not received quite so well. similarly, like marking up screenshots and surveys. I know that you're a big fan of surveys,
I am.
Elise. Yeah. And so again, like that's a way, if you think about a meeting is where you want to get feedback, you want to understand how someone feels about something. A survey is a great way to capture that, and also in a consistent way, as opposed to potentially interviewing, a group of stakeholders. For instance, I recently did a website, and there were a large number of stakeholders who had to be, whose viewpoint had to be included. And what we did was we sent out a survey to probably 150 people, and maybe 25 of them actually responded. And then of the 25, there were, three or four that had really great responses in the sort of like, tell us anything else, free text fields. And so then we had interviews with those three because they had demonstrated that they had a great understanding of the challenges, they were engaged, they were perfect targets. But the survey, we had like a kind of very high level view of responses, and then we were able to get really discreet and identify who to spend time with. Direct messaging, everybody's using Slack and email, and it can be, the perfect medium for communicating. Again, I know you use Slack in your coaching group. So I think, in my company, we use Slack. We don't really have our clients on the Slack, just because I like our Slack to be kind of a client free zone where we can, speak plainly and honestly without worrying about being diplomatic. But I do know that some other agencies absolutely share Slack channels with their clients. And if your client is up to that, then I think that's a really good way to communicate. Something I use with my clients is a knowledge base. And often it's really just a Google Doc that has, we keep all of our agendas on the Google Doc. We put the action items from our meetings on the Google Doc. We put links to any reports or content calendars. So it's all in one accessible place that everyone has access to. And it's a really just very low tech solution. I'm sure that there are lots of wonderful platforms that, do that better, but it's free and it's low tech, and it's a great way to just sort of collaboratively share the information that you need to have shared. And it is always good, though, to have an emergency plan in a company, if how to flag a message if it absolutely needs to be addressed quickly. When people are working virtually and asynchronously and in different time zones, sometimes things can kind of fall through the cracks, or there can be a lag between response time. So it's good to have an emergency plan for how to address anything that's really quick moving and has to be addressed immediately.
I have one question for you, and I do want you to be able to tell us a little bit about your current project. So let's jump to that. One question I have about meetings, I personally love meetings, and my business is kind of rooted in meetings. And I
Right.
would always prefer to have a conversation than to try to explain something either on a video or by email. But I find that a meeting is kind of like a boundary, or like a motivator to get people to actually do what they said they're going to do, or what they know they're supposed to do. And sometimes it doesn't even
Mhm.
work. But how do you feel about both meetings that are designed? I mean, maybe that's a collaborative meeting, but meetings that are designed to actually get something done that is not getting done, and people who just can't find the time to do their part. And so a
Mhm.
meeting is kind of the solution to that. That's the biggest problem I see.
Yeah. So I think when you're using a meeting that way, I think there's some deeper problems essentially not that I certainly have used that meetings that way, and it is a good way to sort of put someone on the hot seat, as it were, to make sure that they understand that they need to do whatever. But ultimately, that's probably a management challenge. That differs between, is this person someone who reports to you, or is this your
Or your
client?
client, right? Your
Right.
client.
So your client, you know, because they are your client, I think you probably do end up having to default to a meeting because you don't have any other leverage over your client. But if it is in your own team, then it's a reporting problem, and while a meeting is sort of a quick and efficient way to address it, ultimately I think that it demonstrates that there are bigger problems that will eventually kind of fester and rise up, even though you're having these meetings.
So, and I think let's save your successful meeting tips for people who might want to dig a little bit more into your content, whether by taking your workshop or sharing some other information that you have. But I know you have another project currently that you're excited about. So just take a moment if you want to and tell us about that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. So, well, first of all, if people are interested in learning more about my meeting content, on my website, which is studiolosecondari.com, in the workshop section, I have a page on the meetings with a lot of information, and you can download the decision map that I shared. And you can also just contact me about scheduling a meeting about meetings, which sounds ironic, but sometimes you have to have a meeting to solve the problem of meetings. The Kickstarter project that I'm working on right now is a book about the Jazz Age Lawn Party, which is an event that happens in New York City over the course of 2 weekends on Governor's Island. And it's kind of like reenactment for the Jazz Age, which to my mind is a little more fun than the Civil War or Colonial War or whatever. Um, and it's a great event where people wear Jazz Age clothes, and they have these beautiful, elaborate picnics with, silver and china. And Michael Arenella and his Dreamland Orchestra play Jazz Age music, and they have lessons on how to do the Charleston and other Jazz Age dances. And it's really just a magical experience. Next year will be the 20th anniversary. And for that anniversary, we would like to have a beautiful coffee table book filled with gorgeous photos of the past 20 years of the Jazz Age Lawn Party. And so we have a Kickstarter. And if you go to Kickstarter and look for Jazz Age Lawn Party, it comes up right away. There's also a link on my website, and you can pre-order the book via Kickstarter. We also have a lot of great tiers with VIP tickets to next year's event, and fashion sketches, and all sorts of great tier options for anyone who would like to contribute.
That sounds like fun. How much are you trying to raise?
$199,000.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a
And
lot.
how much time do you have for that?
August 1st until
Okay.
August 1st. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to publish this as soon as we can, and hopefully people will contribute. Let's just go back for a moment to a baby step that people can take in terms of having better meetings or fewer meetings or whatever would make their meeting process better. Do you have a baby step people can take?
Yeah. So I think doing the meeting assessment, like looking at your calendar and seeing how many meetings you have, and trying to identify what kind of meetings they are based on the three meeting types that I've described. I think that would be useful. And then seeing if any of those meetings can be abbreviated with more asynchronous help, or eliminated altogether, or maybe just reduced in frequency. All of those things can give you almost immediate satisfaction in terms of like sharing saving you some time.
And would you say, one more question, there is an ideal amount of time one should or shouldn't spend in meetings per week?
No, I think that's really related to the person and their role. As I mentioned, as a small business owner, if you are getting work through, networking and introductions, obviously there's a lot of meeting that happens. I don't know that you can get rid of that. Whereas if you are a creative who has kind of, more regular projects, you may not need to have lots of these status meetings to say like where the website is. Like maybe you can just update a report and keep your work flowing and actually be more productive. So I think it does depend on the kind of work you're doing. And also the personality type. I mean, some people are drained by meetings and so definitely should be having less meetings. Other people I think are invigorated by meetings, and
Right.
if they can be productive and have meetings, then more power to them, as long as they're conscious of everyone else's time and that not everybody else is enjoying meetings.
All right, Linda. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for sharing and for reaching out and offering to share, and give your website one more time for people.
Yeah, so the website is studiolosecondari.com, and that's studiolosecondari.com.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, and we will see you soon.
Okay, thank you, Elise.
I agree with Linda. The first step is a meeting assessment. Go through your calendar and look closely at the meetings you are currently saying yes to. How many do you have? Which of the 3 types are they? Can any of them be abbreviated, reduced in frequency, or eliminated altogether? Remember, your most precious resource is at stake. And speaking of precious resources, if you want to build a thriving business on your own terms, the first step is to sign up for my precious resource, my quick tips at marketing-mentortips.com. Once you're on the site, you'll find lots more resources, including my simplest marketing plan. So enjoy, and I'll see you next time.